We will now turn to the lawyers to hear more about the obligation of UN and international community on Ashraf. First is Vera Gowland-Debas. She is Emeritus Professor of International Law, a Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva. You have the floor.
Thank you. After these eloquent speeches that have preceded me, not least that of Madame Rajavi, what I have to say to you will appear very dry and very technical. I was asked to present a legal opinion that I drew up for the people of Ashraf regarding their rights and the obligations of others towards them under international law. And it's very important, in fact, to emphasize the legal framework, the international law framework, because international law, of course, can be dismissed as being overridden by politics and diplomacy and so on, but international law has become a universal language, and it is essential in any dialogue with the international community. It's become such an international language that even CNN and Al Jazeera rely on international law terms and dialogues. Now, what this framework is all about. First of all, I would like to underline the protected status of the members of the residents of Ashraf. They are protected under international law, and protected status is very important because from status flows, as I said, rights and obligations. And they are protected on three counts. They're protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention. They're protected as long-term resident aliens in Iraq. They are protected as refugees. And also, the camp as a whole has a protected status under international law. And what I would like to underline in particular is the responsibility under international law of all states, in particular the United States, the European Union and the United Nations, since the situation, the rules and the norms that underlie this legal framework are a matter of concern for the international community as a whole. We have seen a development in international law whereby some fundamental norms, they're fundamental for the interests and the values of the international community as a whole, have been underlined, and therefore they are of concern to every state, and of course in particular to the United Nations. Right. As far as I'll go very, very briefly, obviously, over these different statuses. First of all, status as protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Conventions. I think you've heard quite a bit about that. You've heard that they were granted by the U.S. military in 2004 protected status. Now that means, of course, that the Fourth Geneva Convention came into play, and in particular, the prohibition of individual or mass forcible transfers, as well as deportation from the Iraqi territory. Now, one may consider today that the Geneva Conventions are no longer in force. There are some arguments to the effect that there's no longer an armed conflict in Iraq, and therefore the Fourth Geneva Conventions have ended. However, first of all, the Fourth Geneva Convention provides for certain provisions to continue in force, particularly protected persons whose release, repatriation or re-establishment may take place after the dates of termination of hostilities. And that is one possibility of the extension of the Geneva Conventions. Also, it is important to emphasize that the diplomatic assurance which the Iraqis gave to the United States is very much lacking. First of all, you know that the assurance, and I quote the U.S. State Department, has provided humanitarian assurances on Camp Ashraf, which includes that no resident will be forcibly transferred to a country where there are grounds for believing they will be persecuted or tortured based on their political and so on opinions. First of all, it is important to emphasize that the United States continues to have responsibility even after transfer of the camp to the Iraqi authorities under the Geneva Conventions. They are not by any agreement, in fact, to give up their responsibilities unless they can be absolutely assured that that protection will continue. In addition, we have seen recently that states have used diplomatic assurances to send so-called suspected persons, suspected individuals, to countries where they do face torture. And the European Court of Human Rights has been extremely clear about that, that you cannot hide behind the diplomatic assurance, in fact.